The Measuring Show.
Since 1970, MPB has been enriching the lives of Mississippians.
Everything we do gives us the chance to grow and learn.
With your support, we are always there whenever and wherever you need us. Together through the years, together in the future. Please consider making a donation at mpbfoundation.org. MPB, your stories, our mission.
Every parent wants their child to grow, to explore, and to dream big. At MPB, we're proud to support families and teachers across Mississippi with trusted educational programming and resources that inspire learning and spark imagination. From PBS Kids Favorites to digital tools and early learning support, MPB is here for young minds, engaged classrooms, and families who believe in the power of learning at every age. Empowering families, inspiring learners. MPB, your stories, our mission.
MPB Think Radio, this is the Sit Down with Russ Latino, where we talk about the ideas and the people that are shaping Mississippi's future. The legislature is back in session today. Hide your wallets. You need to be preparing for elections coming up in 2027. There are municipal elections this year. Doge and a big, beautiful bill are on the horizon. What does that mean for Mississippians? Here to help us break it all down are two old friends we were discussing off air. We used to do this on another station regularly as a roundtable back when we were all young people. Grant Callen, the CEO and founder of Empower Mississippi, father to 5 to 7 children. I really can't keep up, but prolific in the children making. Rebekah Staples, the founder and CEO of Free State Strategies. Rebekah has been in a great number of positions as policy advisor to Governor Haley Barbour, also Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves. She also, fun fact, was the winner of the 2007 Miss Hospitality pageant right here in Mississippi. She's always been very hospitable. Also hospitable in the booth, the luminescent St. Germaine flood.
I'm here.
Keeping it down. Look, before we get into the serious business of the legislature being back in session, a lot of people were like, woo, they're gone. No, they're back. I want to talk a little bit about something maybe more important, and that is college baseball. And so represented in this room is an LSU Tiger fan.
Yeah.
I don't really understand it, but you are. No witty repartee.
Oh, is this the part where we jump in?
Yeah.
Yeah, go Tigers.
A Vanderbilt Commodore fan and Rebekah Staples.
That's right, anchored down.
And I'm an Ole Miss guy. And look, all three baseball programs got a regional for the NCAA tournament.
That's right.
The SEC tournament was this past weekend. Ole Miss handedly beat your LSU Tigers.
Yeah.
2-0. It really wasn't that big of a deal. And then in the championship, got humbled by Rebekah Staples' Vanderbilt Commodores.
That's right. It's good to remind everybody that Vandy not only excels in academics, but is, a powerhouse in athletics these days. And so I'm really excited about the dynamic in this room right now. So, Vandy's the number 1 seed. And as we were talking off air, Hattiesburg, USM is hosting a regional, and they're paired with Vanderbilt. So I'm really hopeful to see a Commodore Eagles matchup at some point. So we'll see.
So Vandy is the number 1 seed hosting. USM is the number 16 seed hosting. So if USM wins, obviously they've got to go against your, Titans up there in Nashville. We should mention, too, though, that Mississippi State actually also made the tournament. They're in the FSU Tallahassee regional as a number 3 seed. So all 3 big Mississippi schools are in play.
Look, it is a fantastic time of year for baseball. I have 2 sons that play baseball. One's playing high school. One is just finished his final year of coach pitch. And there's just about nothing I'd rather do this time of year than either coach baseball, watch baseball. It's just a great time of year.
And you're also a Major League Baseball guy.
I am. I'm a big Braves fan, and I'm going to be going to a Braves game in a couple weeks with my wife. And
how many of the children?
None.
Just you and your wife.
Just me
Good
and
for
my.
You.
This is our 20th wedding anniversary, and my wife was kind enough to let us do one Braves game, and then some time on the beach.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, let's get to more serious business. Obviously, the legislature's back in session. Why? Give me a sense of how we got here. Rebekah, I'll start with you.
Sure. Well, I'll put on my old budget hat. I worked a lot in appropriations in a former life. Essentially, the legislature adjourned sine die. That means they concluded their regular work without adopting a state budget. So it was sort of known as they completed that they'd have to come back into a special session. I'll remind the listeners that the governor of the state is the only one with the authority to call a special session. So, the lieutenant governor, the speaker, appropriators, and the governor have been working since the conclusion of the regular session to come to an agreement. And so that's why you saw the governor officially announce the special session call for 11 a.m. today. And he said it would focus primarily on the state budget.
So give me a sense, and either one of you can jump in on this, give me a sense of how odd it is for the legislature not to have a budget by the end of sine die in the regular session.
I think the last time was like 6 years ago where they did something like that.
I think, and you might be right, I was thinking it's a bit longer than that. I was thinking we were about 14, maybe 2010 when they adjourned a regular session without a full budget. And that would be during the time period in which there was a significant economic decline, the Great Recession. But there have been sort of budget disagreements where portions of the state budget have not been adopted. You've seen that several times with like the Medicaid budget. But I consider this a little bit unusual to not have a full budget. But I do want to say it's my understanding that even during the regular session, they were fairly close on sort of big picture budget items. And you heard the governor allude to this yesterday in his press conference, but there's a hang-up on special projects, which is typically something included in a budget where lawmakers advocate for projects in their districts.
But I think it's a little bit interesting in that they weren't that far apart on most of the budget issues. There was lots of disagreement about other policy issues. And some of those were even speculated that the governor could have included those in the call for the special session. As you know, he can include what he wants. He gets to define the terms. The House and Senate leaders do not for a special session. And a lot of the disagreement was really about the process for getting to a budget, not what was actually in the budget. And so you saw a disagreement during the session about whether there would be a budget decided over conference weekend. Conference weekend is typically the last session of the general session where they kind of hole up on a Saturday and Sunday, but it's relatively quick turnaround. And the speaker made clear over the last couple of years that he wanted to change the budget process, and instead of having really quick turnaround where people had to read the bills quickly, they wanted to do it differently. And he kind of put his foot down and went home over to the weekend that would have been conference weekend. And so here we find ourselves, about a month before the end of the fiscal year, and they've got to put together a budget.
Yeah, I think that argument would be resonant with a lot of people that, hey, this shouldn't be something that comes together over a weekend. You're talking about billions of dollars in spending, general fund spending over $7 billion. But really, the total state budget is like $28 billion or something, right? So it is a lot of money flowing through the channels of government. And at some level, it makes sense that you would be meticulous and spend a lot of time. You mentioned, though, that you were a part of this process for a very long time. The truth is that it doesn't all happen over a weekend, even before now, right?
Right. And I was going to say that. So I think there is this perception that it happens because you see a lot of the deadlines and the sort of public activity in conference weekend typically. But for those who maybe didn't spend about 16 years working in budgets, I'll tell you what the process is. It starts in the fall prior to the legislative session beginning in January, where state agencies are required to submit their sort of budget documentation and request. Then you have the Legislative Budget Committee with equal number of members from the House and and Senate. They meet to adopt a legislative budget recommendation, and that's released typically in December each year. You also have a governor who is required to release an executive budget recommendation. So you've got competing budget recommendations, which is work that includes analysis of what the needs are and the expected revenue. So all of that happens before they gavel in on January. But when they gavel in, you have the committee process. And so what we've seen under Speaker White, he's instituted a new process in House Appropriations where you have more subcommittee chairmen. And so you've had more subcommittee meetings. That's kind of aligned with what Grant was talking about, the Speaker looking for more transparency. So that process is ongoing throughout the session. The same in the Senate. You have an opportunity where agencies come and explain their budget requests before the subcommittee chairman. And so I do kind of push back on the perception that it happens all in a weekend because it is a process. But I will say this, lawmakers are humans, and conference weekend, the reason it tends to work to get a budget done or other items is because you have a series of deadlines by which conference reports must be filed. And so you have that it's now or never kind of mentality, and that tends to force sort of agreement or compromise.
And one of the complicating factors that's unique the last couple of years, which is a great thing, is we actually have revenue, and we have revenue that exceeds spending. So there have been years where they were looking for cuts and they were trimming and they were trying to figure out how to make the numbers work. Part of the challenge, and this is a tremendous thing, is that we have record revenue. And so you've got a lot of people standing up saying, well, I have ideas on how to spend that. Other people saying, I have ideas on how to save that. And so there's a lot of competing interest when the revenues are looking great.
Yeah, it turns out when government has money, the people in power want to spend it. We've got to take an itsy-bitsy break right here on the Sit Down, but we will be back momentarily, talking a little bit more about what the legislature will do in the next couple of days, maybe some of the real reason things fell apart at the end of session. And what the heck, we'll turn our attention to elections. We're only a couple of years out. We'll speculate a little bit about what the governor's race is going to look like. Stay tuned for more. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Desiree Frazier, host of the award-winning news program, Mississippi Edition. We bring you conversations about the latest news from across the Magnolia State. Whether it's politics, healthcare, or education, you'll hear in-depth discussions on issues that matter to you. So join us each weekday morning at 8:30 on MPB Think Radio, or download the podcast, listen through the app, and online.
Mississippi is a place of deep roots where every story matters and every voice can be heard. At MPB, we stand with our local communities, bringing you the voices of those who shape our state through local programming that reflects our culture across small towns to big cities, from the Delta to the coast. We tell the stories that define us, from the music that carries our voices to the leaders who inspire change. MPB brings you the heart of Mississippi, celebrating Mississippi one story at a time. MPB, your stories, our mission.
At the Mississippi Arts and Entertainment Experience in Meridian, we believe in the power of the arts, storytelling, and education, just like Mississippi Public Broadcasting. MPB connects communities across the state with quality programs that inform, inspire, and engage. Their audience is loyal and appreciative of businesses that support public broadcasting, which makes underwriting on MPB a smart investment. Join us in supporting MPB. Learn more at mpbfoundation.org.
Rebekah Staples, breaking down a little bit of what happened in this legislative session, why the legislature is back in session today, maybe tomorrow, to make a budget. And I do think it's interesting because you both pointed out different historical incidents. So, Grant, you're right that there have been times in the last several years where they've been called back to do one or two agencies, right? That they didn't have budgets for one or two agencies. But I think, Rebekah, you're also correct that this is an abnormal thing to do the entire budget all at once. We were talking about why that happened and some of what was publicly put out there, which is a difference in process, a desire on the part of the House to elongate the process, make it more transparent. But there also was a lot of other subtext that went into sort of the devolving of things at the end of the legislative session. One of those things being the tax bill and the way the tax bill ultimately got to the governor's desk. How much do you guys think acrimony over policy affected the end result at the end of the session?
Oh, I think it always affects. And, Governor Reeves was on a different radio program this morning, and he reminded folks that there is always tension between the House and the Senate. There's always tension between the House and the Senate in Washington and in Jackson, and I think that's true. I mean, I have been a part of the legislative process from the outside as an advocate, as a lobbyist for 19 years now. And
you're old.
I am old. There's a lot of evidence of that. But
in case you're listening, we're friends.
Or we were before this program,
we were friends.
And I'm just over here wondering what you old men are doing because I'm clearly very young still.
Clearly.
So, yeah.
Russ and I have aged.
The spring chicken in the room. Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
She also started working for Governor Haley Barbour, I think, when she was about 7. I'm not sure.
Well, I was going to say 13.
Okay.
So.
Anyway, but there has always been acrimony and a sense of competitiveness between the two chambers. And we absolutely saw that this year, but I think some of that is the way the process is intended to work. We have divided government. We have a separation that's intentional because policy should be hard to pass. We want there to be a real a bar you have to get over, that you got to get legislation through both chambers in the exact same form, and then you got to get the governor to sign it. And so there's a lot of ego. There's a lot of competition between the two chambers, but I think we end up with better policy because of that process.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. Of course, as Grant is talking, I'm thinking about an example of this in recent years. Former House Ways and Means Chair Jeff Smith would always call the Senate, when he was speaking on the House floor, the House of Lords. And he did not mean that exactly as a compliment. So there has been this historic sort of tension, which I think is part of, the beauty of America. You have these checks and balances. But I'd also say, having spent many years at the Capitol, it's hard. You can't really separate the personality from the policy because you're in a very finite location at the Capitol. It's a bit of a pressure cooker. You're not just working on a state budget. You're working on a retirement system, looking at revenues. You're looking at general bills. And so there's a lot of stress and anxiety that goes along with that. And so in addition to the politics, just the dynamics of being all together all the time. And I think that's one reason you saw Governor Reeves, when he was first talking about the need for a special session, encourage the lawmakers. What did he say? Go home, take a water bath, take a reprieve, and then come back a little more balanced of mind.
Yeah, and look, I've been around it a while too, and you're right that at the end of session there is always tension. Bills are dying that members in one chamber didn't think should die. And then bills are getting compromised on in a way that very often means that they're kind of worthless.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of frustration there. I do think this was unique in the sense that is always there, but they still always pass a budget. And so there clearly were some unique factors this year. I think the tax bill is probably pretty high on that list in terms of feelings about the way that it got passed. That being said, I think you guys are absolutely also right that time heals most wounds. Not all, but most. And so there is something to be said for going home and touching grass, which I think a lot of these guys do. Speaker Jason White told me this at one point. He said, they have the bring your kids and grandkids to the Capitol towards the end of session, he's like, it's really good as a reminder that, hey, these are normal people. You know, like these people that I'm currently not liking are human beings with families.
And I talked to a senator last week who said, you know, he's like, it feels so important and it feels so critical. And he's like, and then we go back home and then we were reminded some of this is pretty petty. Some of this really is like middle school at the Capitol. And it kind of helps our constituents remind us, like, y'all get up there and get it done and stop all the pettiness. And he's like, we just kind of forget that sometimes when we're in the midst of a heated session.
Jocks versus nerds never ends. So let's talk about the session itself a little bit. And I am curious, when you look at the panoply of things that were done, the things that weren't done, the level of rancor that you experienced, how would you rate this legislative session on a scale of 1 to 10? And then maybe give a reason for your score. Who wants to go first? I'm looking at you.
Yeah, you're looking at me. I'm going to give it a 7 for a couple of reasons. You already talked about House Bill 1. This was a historic, I would say transformational tax proposal that has been in the works and discussed and debated and talked about for many years. And there's been progress made in recent years to cut and diminish and lower Mississippi's income tax. But this is the first time legislation passed and the governor signed that will permanently phase out Mississippi's income tax. And that is historic. It's something my organization has supported, a lot of folks have supported, because we see there are 9 other states that don't have an income tax, and there's a lot of evidence that those states have strong, thriving economies, and this puts us in position to start attracting capital like those states that don't have an income tax. So I'm going to give it a 7 because we got something really historic that I think my kids, as you mentioned, all 5 of them, and hopefully my grandkids will look back and say, you know what, Mississippi's been prospering these last 50 years, and in part because folks in 2025 took the heroic step of phasing out our income tax. The reason I'm not giving it an 8, 9, or 10 is because we left undone something that all of our surrounding states have done, and that is school choice. And there's been a lot of conversations about school choice in Mississippi over those last 18, 19, 20 years. Relatively little action has happened. We have a thriving charter school sector. We have a special needs ESA where some families can use public dollars to attend a private school if your child has special needs. Beyond that, we basically don't have a fraction of the options that families have in states in Alabama, Tennessee, Arkansas, or Louisiana. So they left that undone. I can't give it a higher than a 7.
Rebekah?
I'm struggling over here between a 6 and a 7. I'm going to go with 6.5, and let me walk you through some of my metrics. And so I'm probably...
She's got a chart over there, doesn't she?
Look, okay, I'm probably a little critical because I spent so many years at the Capitol, and so I might be a little too critical here. But so if 10 is your perfect score, you have some immediate deductions. They didn't get a budget done, as Grant said, so I'm going to deduct 1. I'm going to deduct 1 point for civility. I thought there was some pettiness. Now, I am not opposed to some good political fighting, but I think there's a difference between political fighting that moves the needle and then pettiness. And so deduction of 1 for pettiness. And then I also thought about school choice, and the reason I think that's so important for many of the reasons Grant noted. But, you know, we have a labor force participation issue. We have population that we'd like to see grow further, and I think education is critical to all of that. And so this inability to move the needle on school choice policies, I really find a little bit confusing. So all that said, you've got a deduction of 3 immediately, so you're at 7. And I would not say that, but for those aspects, it would be a perfect session. So I'm going to take off another half point and give them 6.5.
Whoever thought that I would be the optimist in this group, I would give the session an 8, and for a number of reasons. HB1 is certainly at the top of that list for me. I mean, 10 years ago, I started, pushing as hard as I could around this idea that income tax elimination would be game-changing for the state of Mississippi. And so getting to the point that there is a clear path and instrument to do that, to me, is a huge deal. Maybe the most consequential piece of legislation that I can remember in the last decade, if not longer. Not only that, but the PERS reform that was contained in that bill, and I know this is near and dear to your heart, that subject, there's still more room to go, right? There's more things that need to be done. But being able to get across that third rail of politics for some significant reform, I think is particularly noteworthy. I think the other thing with the budget, and this will be an odd, circuitous route, and I want your feedback, Rebekah, on this, but I think the budget number would have been higher than what they're about to pass had it not gone down the way it's going down. So in an odd way, their inability to reach a budget during session is going to be good for people who are concerned about fiscal restraint.
Yes, absolutely. And before I answer that, let me say, I think you are right, because in my analysis, I did not factor in, because I wrote down over here, Tier 5 of PERS, which I think is significant and reduces risk to taxpayers in a meaningful way. And then House Bill 1, Build Up Mississippi Act, is transformational. And so perhaps my 6.5, I could add a few points there. So I think that's a great point. But Russ, to your conclusion that we're probably going to end up with a budget that spends a little bit less than we would have otherwise, I totally agree. I think just the fact you have Governor Reeves in sort of the primary position as a negotiator on the budget, he can set the call alone. He gets to dictate sort of the issues. So I know him to be a budget hawk who is focused on, spending as little taxpayer dollars as possible. And so, the speaker, the lieutenant governor, I think probably part of the agreement was a budget that the governor found to be fiscally conservative. So he said yesterday it's essentially level funding at about $7.135 billion for FY 2026. And if you look at FY 2025 appropriated, that's essentially level. So I think that's a win.
And I will tell you, as of a couple of weeks ago, I had people in both of the chambers saying the number was somewhere between 7.2 and 7.3. So the number that he is saying they're going to come down at is much more fiscally responsible than the number that had been proposed.
Yeah, and talking about the PERS piece, I'm a fiscal conservative, so I want us to be very careful about how we spend state tax dollars. But part of being a conservative means we honor our word. And so one of the things I like about this approach to fixing PERS is we are honoring the commitment that we've made to people who have invested years of their life serving in some form of service to the state where you're in the PERS system. This doesn't impact them at all. This honors those commitments, the promises we've made, but it also says we've got to make changes for future hires. So the only changes we're making are for people who haven't even started working yet, and I think that's a responsible way to address a problem.
We've got to take a little bit of a break, but we will be back in just a moment. We're talking with Rebekah Staples, Grant Callen, about the special session. We'll maybe shift gears a little bit, talk about labor force participation rate. Rebekah, you brought that up. I think it's a big deal. You're listening to The Sit Down with Russ Latino. We will be right back.
The Measuring Show.
Since 1970, MPB has been enriching the lives of Mississippians.
Everything we do gives us the chance to grow and learn.
With your support, we are always there whenever and wherever you need us. Together through the years, together in the future. please consider making a donation at mpbfoundation.org. MPB, your stories, our mission.
When the weather turns severe, when breaking news affects your family, when Mississippi needs answers, MPB is there. We provide real-time emergency alerts, trusted news coverage, and live broadcasts of emergency updates. Available on TV, radio, and online. MPB is on the air and by your side every day of the year. Because when it matters most, Mississippi turns to MPB, Mississippi's trusted source. MPB, your stories, our mission.
Together through the years, together in the future. MPB, your stories, our mission.
The ideas and people that are shaping Mississippi's future. You can also join today's conversation right now. The number 1-877-MPB-RING. That's 1-877-672-7464. Now back to the Sit Down with Russ Latino.
Germaine, you've got such a good voice for that. I just want your voice. And your energy generally.
You can have it, like Ursula on the, on the Little Mermaid.
Did you just compare me to Ursula?
No. But
Ouch.
you know, when I think, let me have your voice. That's what
No, I get it. You'll just have to find a prince within the next 3 days.
That's right. I've got a show to do on Friday and tomorrow.
Oh, well, we were talking before the break. We're talking with Grant Callen and Rebekah Staples. We were talking before the break about some of the good, the bad of this past legislative session. I know, Rebekah, in sort of recounting things in terms of priorities, you mentioned labor force participation rate. I think for a lot of people, they might not even know what that is. Would you kind of explain what that is?
Yes. Okay. So labor force participation rate is simply the measure of people who are looking for a job and are unemployed. And so it's how many people are looking for work. And so, why that's important is because we want to see as many people working in Mississippi as possible. It leads to healthier economic revenues, growth in the economy that we're seeing with record capital investment, job creation numbers. I feel like Governor Reeves is cutting a ribbon or announcing an economic development project, once or twice a week. But we still see among the nation's lowest labor force participation rate. In March of this year, Mississippi's rate was at 56.1%. And so compare that to the national rates around 62%. So we're lagging behind despite all of this positive economic growth in this trajectory. So we've been looking at that as it relates to, the drag on Mississippi's economy. But I will say some really positive movement we've seen since about spring of last year. The labor force participation rate has ticked up about 2.5 percentage points, which is a trend. This is over multiple quarters. And so I'll quote Dr. Corey Miller. He's a state economist. He was looking at that movement, and in testimony before the Legislative Budget Office, he said that's a pretty good move, which, from an economist is, a glowing endorsement. So.
Yeah, and I think this is my guess is this is a lagging indicator, and I do think a lot of the things we're seeing in terms of the economic growth in the state is going to translate into higher workforce participation. I mean, one of those measures is last year, Mississippi saw the second strongest GDP growth of any state in the country. So we were growing faster than 48 other states. I mean, that is tremendous growth. You're going to see more people come into the workforce as a result of new jobs and new opportunity. I think this really matters not only to the state, not only to the economy of the state, and you're going to see that translate into state revenues. It matters to our people. And it matters because work is such a good thing. It's such a important piece of what it means to be human, to have an opportunity to use your God-given gifts to build something, to create something, to better your community, to provide a good or service that helps somebody and also provides a salary for you and your family to be able to put food on the table. So work is good. It's been a concern that Mississippi has had such large percent of our population that isn't working. And it's something that merits the kind of attention that it's starting to get at the Capitol. And I think we're going to see it turn around.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. And Rebekah, I think you mentioned something really important, is that in the last 10 years, there are now 78,000 more people in the workforce in Mississippi than there were just 10 years ago. This is at a time where our population has actually slightly gone down. And you look at that, and that may seem like just a random number in a vacuum, but that's as if you had another city the size of Gulfport and every man, woman, and child went to work. Right? In terms of contribution to the economy. And so you see that with our GDP number steadily rising, even adjusted against inflation, steadily rising. One of the really unique things, we're lagging the national labor force participation rate, but since COVID, since the COVID trough, we have bounced back faster than the rest of the country. So I think we've had like a 5.8% growth in our labor force participation rate. The national average is about 4.2% over that same period of time. So Mississippi clearly is doing some things right. It's one of the reasons that I was kind of optimistic in my rating of what happened this past session. Obviously, as we look at the good things, whether it's the improvements in education, whether it's this conversation around our economy improving, new jobs, new economic development, part of that conversation has to be about leadership. And in a lot of ways, I don't think the current crop of leaders, even though they sometimes are at each other's throat, collectively, I don't think they get enough credit for the management that they've done. I'm curious what you guys think.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, look, on this particular issue, there has been a lot of talk and there's been some really significant action. And when you think about one of the things that I think is going to drive an increase in labor force participation is we're ending the tax on work. So we're making it easier to work and not pay a penalty for doing the work. We're going to fund state government through other mechanisms eventually as it's fully phased out. And that is something that is leapfrogging other states. I mean, there's probably 8, 9, 10 states right now that are talking about eliminating their income tax. We did it first. We got the legislation passed to do it, and other states are looking to us to see how it's done. So that, House, Senate, Speaker White, Governor Hosemann, and Governor Reeves all deserve a ton of credit for getting that over the finish line.
And I would add Speaker Philip Gunn to that mix as well. I know he's been gone for 2 years, but a lot of the stuff 100%. That's paying dividends right now happened under his leadership as well.
Yeah, and I think this is a great point, Russ. And I'll just say that even today when I'm ranking the legislative session, my tendency was to look at what I wanted to get done but didn't, not to, focus on the transformational policies that were shifted. But I think that is a great point. Governor Reeves this morning actually talked about on a separate radio show how the foundation has been laid. And so it's no accident that Mississippi's economy is on this upward trajectory. So I do think we need to give credit where it's due. Speaker Gunn, Governor Bryant, Speaker White, Lieutenant Governor Hosemann, and Governor Reeves have all, over the last sort of 20 years, been working collectively in various capacities to create this pro-business, pro-growth environment. And, you see this connection between education and think about the Literacy-Based Promotion Act of 2013 that laid the foundation for the Mississippi Miracle. You couple that with historic tax cuts and now a pathway to tax elimination. I mean, we're sort of taking for granted these conservative policies, but this is very difficult to get past, and I just got to give kudos to our leaders for doing that and keeping their foot on the accelerator. And as we're talking about labor force participation, I do want to note that the legislature and the governor are taking concrete steps. They actually created a task force to look at social services and sort of welfare reform. Is there a way we can help improve the labor force participation rate by setting up a system of government that's a little more streamlined and effective, but actually accomplishes its mission of getting folks back into the workforce? So, from big tax policies, tax elimination, to a task force that's going to look deeper at these issues. I mean, I think conservative lawmakers are getting it right.
Yeah, and we've got to incentivize work and productivity and not incentivize dependency. And I do think that's a positive direction that we are headed as a state. Lots of hurdles in front of us. Speaking about what is in front of us, we have municipal elections this year. I'm curious if you guys are watching any races, if you find any races interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I've got two I'll mention. The first is just Jackson. So there's a big part of my heart that's in Jackson. I married a Jackson girl. I went to college in Jackson. I go to church in Jackson. We need a thriving capital city, and it hasn't been thriving for a number of years. And so I'm really excited to see that there's going to be a change in leadership. It is so at this point we have the Democrat nominee is State Senator John Horn. We have a Republican and some independents. I won't say that race is completely decided, but it certainly is looking like it will be John Horn will probably be the next mayor. That's going to be a very refreshing change for the city of Jackson, and I'm excited to see what the next 4 years hold. Another race I've been watching closely is Gulfport. You have incumbent Mayor Billy Hughes has decided he's not running again. And so there's a Republican, Hugh Keating, and a Democrat, former state representative Sonia Williams-Barnes, who is running. Gulfport is a growing community. It's a part of the state that is increasingly important to our state economy. And I think at this point that race is kind of a toss-up. You got to think it kind of tilts Republican because of the demographics and the outgoing mayor, but it's a toss-up and could go either way.
Yeah, the number of people that turned out in the Democratic primary in Gulfport certainly suggests that race is a toss-up. And you see national folks, both Republicans and Democrats, that are starting to engage on a Gulfport mayoral race, I think because they view it as a contest that can be won or a contest that can be lost.
Yeah. That's right. Actually, those are the two races. Those are two of the races I'm watching as well. In the Gulfport race, I will say Governor Haley Barbour endorsed Hugh Keating, the Republican nominee. And one of the reasons he did that was citing Hugh's work after Katrina to help rebuild the coast, and particularly Centennial Plaza, which is just a great facility. And so, Grant was talking about the city of Jackson, and I've long believed, Jackson is sometimes the only city folks who are visiting Mississippi might ever see. And so it's the capital of our state. It should be a showpiece, but it hasn't been that. But I'm really excited to see the trajectory. I'll say just looking at state leaders, and we'll talk municipality, but the state has made an effort to better support Jackson with many of the leaders in place right now. I'll speak about the Capitol Complex Improvement District in terms of the infrastructure investments. Under Republican leadership, the legislature and state are investing over $100 million into downtown Jackson in the district to improve streets, roads, bridges. But I think part of that is having local leadership that works collaboratively to turn around the city. And so I'm thrilled to see Senator Horn win the Democrat nomination. I believe he will be. And Grant said it's not decided. That's right. The general election is
There
June
still
3rd.
is an election.
There is an election June 3rd, but I believe Senator Horn will become Jackson's next mayor, and I'm excited for that. I'll tell you, I've worked with Senator Horn for many, many years, and you think about some of the major pieces of legislation that have been passed, they often have his name, whether it's the creation of the Capitol Complex Improvement District from 2017. If you look at the 1 cent sales tax commission that was passed under Haley Barbour and is now funding many projects in the city. So all of that, Senator Horn has had his hand in. And so this is a proven leader with experience working across the aisle and with state leaders, with local leaders. So I'm really optimistic about where we're going in Jackson. And the third race, I will say.
Oh, there's a third. But wait, there's more.
But wait, there's more. And y'all won't be surprised to know it's a race in the Free State of Jones. Mayor Johnny McGee is the Democrat nominee and current incumbent. And he has a challenger on June 3rd. But the mayor of Laurel, Johnny McGee, has been such a great example of a pro-growth mayor who looks at a project and a goal and just does what is necessary to achieve that. He's someone that, I have never experienced to be highly political. It's just really results focused. And I don't have to tell y'all how much Laurel has it going on right now. So that's the third race I'm watching.
Well, I can't believe we're 50 minutes into this interview and she finally mentioned Free State of Jones. This is her hometown and my hometown. We're both from Laurel.
Yeah, I feel outnumbered, to be honest with you.
You really are.
We're on our best behavior right now.
Yeah, you haven't bragged too much. And I forgot to mention that you, in fact, were in at least one episode of Hometown, right?
That's right.
The star of Hometown is in the booth with us.
But I will say Mayor McGee has been a great mayor, and I've enjoyed getting to know him a little bit, and just he is well respected on both sides of the aisle.
See, y'all are killing the clock on what will be the juiciest segment of the day, which is...
Maybe that's our strategy.
It's November 6th, 2027. Who is governor? I just get
radio silence.
Radio silence. You're not willing to say. Okay,
I will say it's going to be a Republican.
Maybe.
I'll go with Republican. I'll tell you names I'm hearing.
Why don't we talk about some names then, since y'all are unwilling to...
Well, look, I'm a data person. We don't have enough data right now to make that calculation. Or if we do, I don't think it'd be a very good calculation because we're making up a lot of things. And it's a lifetime between now and 2027.
So who are the names?
All right. So speaking of Jones County, our fellow Jones County and State Auditor Shad White is a name I keep hearing. But I hear that for several statewide elected officials. Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann said recently that he's pretty sure he'll toss his hat in the ring for governor. I'm hearing Attorney General Lynn Fitch. Some folks say Commissioner Andy Gibson. Other names I've heard, I feel like this list is long. Congressman Trent Kelly, Pine Belt businessman Tommy Duff is a name that's getting a lot of chatter, especially in the Pine Belt circles where I run. So already, what are we up to, 8 or 9 right there?
Yeah, and then you've got conversations about former Speaker Philip Gunn.
That's right.
You've got conversations about former Congressman Greg Harper. So lots of names floating around out there about this governor's race. When it comes down to it, how many people do you think ultimately run? It's not all of those people, right? They're going to be people that fall by the wayside.
I don't think all of those will ultimately run. I do think if Tommy Duff were to run, he probably there's a few people that probably decide not to run if he runs, simply because he has the ability to self-fund in ways that others don't. Now, when you were on my podcast, I asked you whether
I gave you an answer.
No,
you dodged. I gave you an answer as to who the prohibitive favorite was.
Okay, but I asked you, would you take Tommy Duff or the field? And you dodged.
Did I?
You did.
I think Tommy represents a real challenge, assuming that he's willing to fund. There have been other business people historically who have said, I'm ready to write a big old check. And when push came to shove, they weren't ready to write the big old check. But if he's going to put up $15 or $20 million, good money will chase that. Good money won't chase the smaller campaigns with the smaller war chest. it makes it really difficult to beat him. Now, he starts with a tremendous name ID disadvantage because we're sitting here talking about him. Most people probably don't know who he is. But that can be bought.
Yeah.
Certainly if you've got the coffers. So, if he enters the race, does a Shad White or does a Lynn Fitch or, Andy Gibson decide that they're going to run for something else? I think the chance of some of them doing that is high. I also think there's a chance that at least one of them would look at it and say, I've got an opportunity to be the dark horse, the contrast candidate. And so that would be my read.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I do think I'm thinking about some businessmen who have sort of said, hey, I'm in it to win it, but then have not put up the money necessary to generate that name ID or recognition. And so I totally agree. If Tommy Duff does put up, 10 million, 15 million, that's not chump change. That's real money. And so I think this is not always the case, and I don't like for people to think that money buys, elections, because that is too simplistic of a viewpoint. But it does significantly help your chances if you're able to say money is not a barrier. How can I promote my vision and get out there? I mean, it does kind of grease the skids.
And he does start with this advantage, too, is nobody actually knows what he believes right now. So there's a clean slate, whereas some of these others have taken hard positions, and that's either good or bad for them, right?
And the last major kind of unknown candidate that was a business guy who came out of nowhere and declared his candidacy for governor, he won. This was Governor Kirk Fordyce, and was a tremendous governor. Did a lot for our state. And so I do think that there will be people that remember that think, hey, a guy who's been extremely successful in business could be successful in politics. But I want to say something about Auditor Shad White. So Auditor Shad White is somebody who has, a lot of people are kind of inside the Capitol bubble are saying he's made a lot of enemies. But when you get outside the Tri-County area and you start talking to people, he's got a lot of fans that I bump into all over the state.
Yeah, I've never been one to subscribe to the idea that the Capitol Circle determines who wins elections. There are numerous examples that the Capitol Circle is frequently wrong about the popularity of candidates. I will say this to close out. I do think that there is a possibility or a risk, depending on how you want to look at it, that Republicans beat the living tar out of each other in a Republican primary. They can't raise the kind of money that Tate Reeves historically has been able to raise. And you have somebody like a Brandon Presley waiting on the other side with another $12 or $13 million, could make for an interesting general election in 2027 without the power of incumbency, without the level of war chest that we've historically seen with a Governor Haley Barbour or a Governor Tate Reeves. This has been fun, guys.
It's been great fun.
It's been awesome. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
The Sit Down is a production of Mississippi Public Broadcasting, Think Radio, funded by generous contributions from listeners like you. Today's show was produced by Germaine Flood, with live stream production by Kevin Farrell. For my special guests, Grant Callen, Rebekah Staples, I'm Russ Latino. Stay tuned for Southern Remedy right here at 11 a.m., and join us next week for a new episode of The Sit Down, heard only here on MPB Think Radio.